You've implemented a tough turnaround. It's been a tough few years.
Yes.
What is the confidence level that you have that the worst for the offshore wind industry is over?
I have a good confidence level that the worst is over. I mean, we are seeing a maturing supply chain. It is still a supply chain that faces bottlenecks, but it is maturing, and we are seeing markets like the US, which literally were built from scratch. Mm-hmm. We are also seeing that scale up, and we also see generally how the 7.6 gigawatts that we are building around the world, so roughly count on a gigawatt powering 1 million homes. That's a lot of offshore wind, and that is going much better. So we're confident.
Here in the U.S., where you had to cancel some projects and take some write-downs, a big part of that is you sign these off-takes, right? And people pay you for a certain amount for power, but then you're exposed to the commodity costs until you actually build it and deliver that power. And that's where everything got a little funky. How do you solve for that funkiness? Yeah,
let me say that generally, the entire renewables industry, and not least offshore wind, which is a longer it has a longer life cycle because they're very big infrastructure projects, got hit by these completely unprecedented circumstances with long interest rates spiking, very high capex inflation, and that hit the entire industry. And because we were the biggest and are the biggest in offshore, we got hit pretty hard with that. And what we do is we move on, saying the things we could no longer invest in, we stopped. But the other things, such as the Revolution and Sunrise wind farms outside of New England and New York, which are progressing well, we built those, and we see that going to plan.
There was still a lot of pushback to that, community pushback, political pushback as well. How do you navigate that? Because when we talk about renewable energy in this country, I think the one that seems to create a lot of divisiveness, at least among community members, are windmills, basically wind power. How do you address that?
Well, we are deeply committed to a positive community engagement. So we engage with all stakeholders. So not only our customers, which is typically states, or in the sake of onshore, typically large corporates or utilities, but we engage deeply with them in an open dialogue. And I'm encouraged to see that the broader support, there are still people who don't like it, but the broader support due to energy security, not least due to job creation. And it's dawning to more and more of our stakeholders that we're actually creating jobs literally across the country in this. And that helps.
At the federal level, you've had a little bit of wind at your back, pun intended, by the Biden administration, which of course has made this part of a huge package of renewable energy plans.
Yes.
It's possible, well, we know we're going to get a new administration, but whether it's an extension of the Biden administration or a new Trump administration, does that worry you?
It is very clear to me that there's a broad support for renewable energy. So the bipartisan support to the job creation, to the energy security, is something that we feel quite comfortable with. And just as an example, our renewables portfolio in the US now is creating jobs in more than 40 US states. And seeing also how we, as Orsted, has been facilitating that the first service and operations vessel built in the US is now coming online, is built in Louisiana. Those things open the eyes of saying, okay, this is actually attractive. And I'm encouraged to see that 18 Republican congressmen sent a letter to the Speaker saying, please ensure that the support for this industry continues.
So wrap it all together then. How do you value how much a wind farm offshore is worth right now when there are a lot of variables?
Yeah. So at any given time, we assess what is the return of that investment that we make. And this is something where obviously the offtake price means a lot. Also the long what are our expectations about the longer power prices when that offtake agreement runs out. And then essentially it also hinges on the interest rates, because the fuel of renewable energy is capital. And therefore, the interest rates also impact the return on that.
Have you noticed like an immediate impact from the interest rates moving lower already here in the U.S.?
Yeah, we don't speculate on what the long-dated interests are, and it's obviously not our decision. So what we do is we focus a lot on how can we build as cheaply as possible, how can we mature a local U.S. supply chain. But when those interest rates start to go down, it does impact the profitability of those projects.
With regards to energy generation and the end uses for that, there's been a lot of talk about the power demands of artificial intelligence and data centers. Microsoft just struck a big deal to effectively restart the 3 Mile Island nuclear facility. Are you getting any, benefit from this embrace of AI and new data centers?
Yeah, absolutely. But we see across the U.S. there is an increasing power demand, and most of this is desirable in terms of being green power. So when we see, for example, artificial intelligence driving a sort of an exponentially increasing power demand, especially our onshore business is benefiting from that. We see that the power price levels goes up because of that demand, and that of course is attractive. That is not yet a big power demand driver in offshore, where we typically have the states where we build as the customers.
Right, because you got to get it to the onshore, you got to plug it in and the whole thing. Before we let you go, a lot of your value comes from building a project and selling stakes in that project. What are those conversations like right now in regards to offshore wind in the U.S., and who are some of the players that you're talking to? Yeah,
so the reason why we sell typically as a standard model, sell 50% of our big wind farms. We keep them and we operate them until the end of their lifetime, but the reason why we sell the 50% is then we can recycle that capital into accelerated investments. And we are talking to some of the big infrastructure investors. I'm not going to name them, but those are people who are deeply interested in having partners like Orsted who also have skin in the game. So we do not sell on a wind farm. We keep 50%. They know that our 50% and the fact that we operate it gives them a great partner. And that is why we have a big interest in actually acquiring that 50% also for our US assets.
Are the investors receptive to the terms of those deals? And if so, what types of investors are we talking about? Are we talking about primarily in the private space, or are you also seeing more support from public investors?
No, it is typically in the private space.
Yeah.
So it's a large infrastructure funds to a large extent, and those are companies who both have the capital, but also given that we can offer them different assets with a different risk profile depending on how early we are in the construction, something our partners find really attractive.